Working. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the very first hustings of this new Exmouth and Exeter East constituency. And a welcome to this beautiful new building if you haven't been here already. This is the Elizabeth Lee building and this beautiful new theatre space, which is such an asset to our town. My name's Nikki. I'm from Sideshore. I'm the one who's done the organising. Thank you for coming and for... Oh. Thank you. That's very kind. I've just remembered, you've just clapped me and now I've made a mistake by not picking up another piece of paper.
Boo her now.
So you need to know there are actually 8 candidates for this constituency. The Electoral Commission rules tell us we don't have to invite everybody, and due to the timings tonight, we've invited these 6. So the other 2 candidates, for fairness, are Peter Faithfull and Mark Baldwin. Peter is independent, Mark Baldwin for the Climate Party. Peter has asked us to read a 3-page statement. I'm going to put that online so that you can access that, and I'll let you know about that later on. Fire exits. Should there be a fire, there will be all the usual sounding. There is an exit here and an exit the way you came in. You need to then make your way to the tennis courts. Very, very unlikely. As you know, we are live streaming. So you will see cameras around. You will have seen the things telling you that we're live streaming, and you will be seen. So if you're not happy to be seen, you do need to leave at this point. On that note, we are live streaming through 4G. We would be really grateful if you don't need your phones. Could you put them on aeroplane mode, which takes out the 4G capacity, which gives us just a bit more to get it out live, which would be brilliant. If you're not able to go on airplane mode, kids at home, whatever, please make sure they're on silent at the very least. Thank you all for your questions. We've had so many questions in advance. They're coming through now. It's brilliant. I assure you, every question to the candidates, obviously we can't answer them all, but we have made a good stab at going through the key topics and choosing the questions that represent those topics, all done in good faith and impartially. I hope you appreciate the questions when we get to them. Obviously, antisocial behaviour will not be tolerated. We do have security. If any of that happens, you will be asked to leave. A big thank you to the volunteers. So without this, without people helping tick you in, yeah, hooray, thank you. And I should say that the guys live streaming are all giving their time free too in the interest of democracy. I will now hand you over to our chair, Mr. David Parsley, who I forgot to make a name badge for, and I feel really bad. David is the chief news correspondent from the iNewspaper, also a resident in Exmouth, and we're very, very glad that he's here to chair tonight's proceedings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nikki. Welcome, everybody. I just wanted to say I've been a journalist for 30 years. I talk to politicians an awful lot and have done over 30 years. I know they have a bad reputation, but I haven't met one that didn't at least start trying to get into Parliament with genuine intentions. You may not agree with their intentions, but they are genuine and they're heartfelt. These guys are all working incredibly hard. You'll agree with some of them, you won't agree with all of them. But please respect them and respect the fact that they've come here to help democracy do what it should do. I will now, by the way, you can show your appreciation or otherwise when you hear the candidates, but let's just keep it civil. On my right, I won't say far right, well, I just did. We have Paul Arnott from the Liberal Democrats. Next to Paul is Helen Dallimore for the Labour Party. Next to me is Gary Sutherland for Reform UK. On my left, we have Dan Wilson, who's an independent. Next to Dan is David Reid, Conservative Party. And we have the Green Party's Ollie Davey. Please welcome your candidates. Right, we drew lots for this. They all get 1 minute uninterrupted from the rest of them and hopefully from you to do their initial pitch. They'll do 1 minute at the beginning and 1 minute at the end, and we kick off with Dan Wilson.
Good evening, Exmouth. My name is Dan Wilson, and I am an independent candidate. I moved to Exmouth 24 years ago, and I live here with my wife and 4 small children, where I work full-time as a tradesman. I'm also very privileged to be an Exmouth Town Councillor and East Devon District Councillor for Exmouth Hustings. I am one of the few local candidates that you have here. And the great thing about being a local candidate is that I know our history, I know our issues, I know our achievements, and I'm excited about the future. I am standing as an independent because I feel the main parties have a very stagnant party line. I don't think there's any excitement for this election, although people are unhappy with the Conservatives. And I want to be your representative to government and not a party's representative to you. Thank you.
Well done. That was under a minute. Amazing. Next, we have Gary Sutherland for Reform UK.
Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. What I want to start off doing is I need to clear something up because I'm getting a lot of attacks on social media about an incident that I was involved with. So I want to give my point, my side, that papers do not report. That day, and I hope nobody in this room has to confront what I had to confront on that day. Okay? I was out with my wife, our family dog, and my 9-year-old twin boys. And my dog was subject of an unprovoked attack. It was bitten by an out-of-control dog whose owner had his lead around his shoulders rather than the dog.
10 seconds.
Okay? Now, I hope none of you have to witness your wife screaming out for somebody to intervene and help while the owner just stood by and did nothing. That's what I had to confront. I had to make a decision whether I jump in front of my wife or jump in front of my children.
That's your time. Okay? Sorry. That's your time. Sorry. Paul Arnott, Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Chair, very much for that. And I've got a measure of sympathy for what's just been said. I think David and I have had a very constructive conversation about this some weeks ago. As far as social media is concerned, can we just please just keep it clean, no trolling? People should be allowed to explain themselves. My minute begins now, Chair. Thanks very much to Nikki and her team for arranging this. I'd like to think that most people who work with me consider me to be pretty genial, but with the stakes so high, I'm going to be more blunt tonight than I would normally wish. 80% of this constituency is in East Devon. A decade ago, there were 45 Conservative councillors at East Devon Council out of 60. That was not good. I am able to lay credit for being the key figure in changing that. Today, the Conservatives in East Devon are just 15, down from 45. And I'm now the leader of the council for a 5th year of a truly progressive alliance of Lib Dems, Independents and Greens. I bear the wounds and the scars of displacing and succeeding a shambolic Conservative regime. And I believe I'm the best qualified candidate with the solid facts to prove beyond doubt that only I can beat the Conservatives. Thank you, Chair.
David Reid for the Conservative Party.
Hello, it's great to be here with you all this evening. I feel very privileged to have the opportunity to stand up for our home and stand up for the country that I love. Many generations of my family have come from this constituency. I'm married to a local woman, our family's here, and I really believe that the time that I spent in the Royal Marines has made me the person I am today. This is my home, and the only reason why I'm getting into politics is to improve it. It's as simple as that for me. I've spent most of my adult life in public service, working for our country, and I now believe that I'm ready to stand up and serve again. Since being selected as the candidate for Exmouth and East almost a year ago, I've gone out and done the hard graft. I've knocked on tens of thousands of doors. I've gone out and spoken to businesses, to organisations, to understand the local issues.
10 seconds.
Whether it's cleaning up our sewage situation, pushing back on overdevelopment that doesn't come with the corresponding infrastructure, improving social care or rolling out more apprenticeship schemes, I've listened and I'm getting on with the job. I'm looking forward to answering all your questions this evening, and I hope that you can see that I've got fire in my belly to improve our home. Thank you.
Ollie Davey for the Green Party.
Thank you. I'm standing in this election because I want to make sure that the environment features in the debate. Despite the tendency of governments to think short term, the decisions we make in the next few years will have huge implications for future generations. We're losing vast amounts of our natural world, all while apparently asleep at the wheel. And despite the many excellent projects taking place around our country, biodiversity loss, exacerbated by a changing climate, carries on unabated. People in this country, broken Britain, are crying out for a change. And I suspect they're going to see a sign under new management, same menu. Only the Green Party has the courage to offer the policies that would offer real hope and real change, properly insulated homes, sustainable energy, protection of the natural world, and prosperity shared by everyone.
And Helen Dallimore for Labour.
I'm Helen Dallimore, your Labour parliamentary candidate. This election is about change, and I want to bring that change and be your voice in the heart of Westminster. I've been listening to people who've been suffering as a result of Tory failures. I've lived in Exeter for 12 years, and as a local mother, I've experienced them firsthand as well. Parties in the pandemic, COVID contracts, under this Tory government, trust has been damaged. I want to rebuild trust and use my professional experience as an employment lawyer to tackle toxicity and make sure diverse views are heard in Westminster. I'll prioritise the environment, and with Great British Energy, we can benefit from opportunities and cost-effective green energy. I'll continue to campaign against sewage pollution, and I'll do that as your MP, ensuring special measures for water companies are put in place and action taken. I want to rebuild our public services and ensure that we can access NHS GPs, dentists. All children can thrive and have a good education, and there's affordable housing. I want to ensure that Exmouth and Exeter East is an even better place to grow up and grow older.
I think you all know if you ask a politician to talk for a minute, they'll talk for 5. So that was actually pretty damn good. Well done, everybody. I just want to do a quick show of hands. I'm not going to ask you who you want to vote for, but I'm really interested to know if you've all made up your minds. So would you raise your hands if you've already decided who you're voting for? That's not too... And who hasn't? That's pretty equal. I'd say that was pretty equal. Yeah. We're going to start with the first question. Unsurprisingly, the first topic is sewage pollution. We've had a hell of a lot of questions on this, not least from Jeff Crawford, Andy Tyman, the co-founders of the local sewage campaign group you probably all know called Escape, Kate Hurley from the Exmouth Rowing Club. But we thought that all of these questions were best encapsulated by another campaigner. Can we find Joe Bateman, please? You can applaud her if you want. Would you stand up so we can see you?
Is it working? Is that okay?
Would you stand up so we can see you? That's right.
How's that?
That's perfect.
Okay. The sewage system isn't working. What are your plans, your personal plans, and your party's plans to reform the system to ensure water companies put human health and the environment first, not putting profit before pollution as they do now, bearing in mind over the last 14 years of Tory government, money and power have been taken away from both Ofwat and the Environment Agency, and they are failing to enforce the laws that are already in place to govern the activities of the water companies. All the manifestos say they will deal with this, but it's lip service only. with no explicit statements of what they will actually do? Is this because we're in line for huge cuts in public spending and there simply isn't any money? So what exactly will you do to ensure that pollution is put before profit?
For nobody that doesn't know already, Jo is taking on South West Water in a legal battle all on her own. It's a pretty brave thing to do, in my opinion, and congratulations to her. So, Paul Arnold, what are you going to do to put pollution before profit?
Thanks, David. Thanks, Sue, very much for that as well. So I'll give you the official line and then what I've done. So the official Lib Dem line is that we need to consider, turning South West Water and similar companies into public benefit companies, if not fully nationalising. We need to make sure that the way in which sewage spills are measured is brought together in one place, one app, so to speak, because we have all sorts of different agencies doing that at the moment. And we obviously need to strengthen Ofwat and Ofwat's regulation and properly fund the Environment Agency. In my direct experience here as leader of the council, I've had to get stuck into this in recent months. I spent New Year's Day very happily down seeing scenes I could not believe of the tankers going from Fair Park, driving round to the Mare, and more or less chucking unfiltered sewage straight into the brook and then into the sea. So as currently what's known as the chair of the Devon districts, so in other words, all of the Devon district councils, we are calling, and we are going to have in October, a summit where we have DLUC from the government, we have the Environment Agency, we have Ofwat, we have all the district councils together, and we try to find a solution now. The problem is obviously deeply historic in one way, which is the combination of foul and rainwater in one pipe. It is, in my view, the very first indication of climate change in this country is that the deluges of rain mean that that system can't work. And unfortunately, under the Conservatives, and this was apparent in 2010 at East Devon, the Conservatives received a water report warning about this, warning about going on with future development, and it was suppressed. Now, a new water report will come to East Devon in the next 2 weeks and will be in the public domain. And I am very keen that we use what planning laws we have to make sure you do not build until infrastructure is in place. You may be able to grant the permission. And these are called Grampian conditions. So I think as a district council, we've really shown a lead on this. But you've got to mark our homework. You've got to watch what we're doing and what the party is doing as well.
Okay, great. Paul had 2 minutes there, so you've got 2 minutes, Helen.
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you for what you're doing, standing up for water companies. I know we met at a protest recently. We talked about putting ourselves out there for what we believe in, and I'm doing the same. I've attended many protests around this issue for a number of years. Key focus for me, and I'm choosing to take it to Parliament now, and that's one of the main reasons I'm standing, because we can't keep going the way we are. And I am really pleased to see that the Labour Party is taking it seriously, that there are some tough measures coming in as well. I think we do need to have proper powers to block the payments of those huge bonuses that the water companies are giving themselves. And as an employment lawyer, I want to make that watertight, excuse the pun, but that you can't just get around that by dividends or pay rises, which is what we've seen recently as well. I think we really need to make sure that that's addressed. There also needs to be criminal charges, fines and criminal charges. People need to be held. And I'd be making sure that they are actually implemented. They don't stay on the statute book, but they're actually put into practice. Also monitoring, it's really hard to determine, what's going on. And so, sorry, can you take that? Make sure that there's proper independent monitoring, because I don't think we can trust what they're saying. And there's lots of ways of trying to get around it as well. That trust has gone significantly. So really need to be making sure that we're addressing it, holding it to account, having that action take place as well. That's what I'd want to be doing. You're absolutely right that the infrastructure is not there. We can't not have a build because we've got a housing crisis. I don't want to renationalise it now and us take the cost of having to put things right when they walk away with all the money they've made. Let's make the water companies pay and plan to have sustainable housing that manages our water better as well, holding water back, thinking about climate change and the impact it's having.
Harry Sullivan.
It's not a new problem, is it? And it's obviously not a problem that's easily resolved. All the parties, the current parties, they seem to have a solution, or they think they have a solution. But the water companies, quite frankly, are just laughing at you. They're mocking you and they're mocking us. Okay? Because a business is a business. A business is there to make a profit. Yeah? Utilities should not be businesses. Yeah? They should be there and organised by the government, provided by the government, run by the government. Now, I'm sure that these utilities can be held to account. There's a charter that they all, and the contract, okay, that they all signed up to. I'm sure a clever legal mind can get them at any time and say, well, you've breached that, you've breached this, therefore your contract is expired. Their fines are, they laugh at the fines, okay? The fines need to be bigger, double if necessary, until they get their act together. I don't put my children in the water. I don't go in the water because it just isn't safe. And we live in a beautiful area. We want more tourists to come in. We want them to use the water. We don't want them to come here healthy and leave sick. Okay, so the solution is punitive fines, get somebody in there, change the management, and deal with them. Effective management of the water systems and other utilities as well. It's not just restricted to sewage and water management.
Can I just ask, Gary, that both Paul and Helen reminded us of stuff I'd heard from the Liberal Democrat and Labour manifestos. You were just telling me that Reform UK would renationalise the water companies.
No, I didn't say what the Reform did, what Reform would do. I was telling you what needs to be done. Okay. You can have a look at the contract for yourself. Okay, it was released yesterday. It's online. Read it. That's what Reform will do.
It doesn't mention anything about renationalising water companies. Is that a Reform UK policy?
No, it's not a policy. I'm saying if you want to provide a proper service, then the government should provide that service. Okay, we're not expecting Reform to be in government. We're expecting Reform to make a proper and coherent opposition to the government and challenge them. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. Dan Wilson.
So I've been in favour of the strongest possible measures. The Conservative government has obviously been very weak on this. The incoming Labour government is talking stronger, but nowhere near strong enough. There needs to be greater investment in storage and treatment capacity. I would end CEO bonuses. I would end dividend payments. I'd be happy to vote for the strongest possible measures. But I would be happy to work with South West Water, providing that they were going to move in the right direction and they were going to be honest, because there's not been a lot of honesty from them for a long time. Every year there seems to be a reset. I think you have to be realistic as an MP. You don't have the great power to suddenly change everything with South West Water. But the interesting thing about Jo Bateman asking this question is that Jo has no great machine behind her. The guys from Escape, no great machine, Surfers Against Sewage, Friends of the River Ex, and yet South West Water are really on the back foot because of that pressure. And that's what we need from an MP. This is personal to me. My children play in that sea, and my father's ashes are spread at Orcombe Point. So if I was the MP, I would be absolutely relentless on making this change.
Thank you. David Reed.
Firstly, Jo, thanks for all you're doing. I've made it very, very clear in the newspapers and elsewhere about my position. The fact that Joe is having to go through this process, the fact that groups like Escape or Surfers Against Sewage or Friends of the River Ex have to exist, shows a clear failure of leadership across many decades and across many different parties at different levels. The approach that I've been very open about that. The approach that I'm taking now, and I've been working on this for about a year since it's been selected, I want to get this sorted out as quickly as possible. I don't want to necessarily have to wait around for national legislation to come in order to see the results that we need. So I just want to touch very, very quickly on the point around renationalisation. I'm sure that a lot of people here will remember what water was like pre-1989 and the effects of... So I was born in 1989, so I don't have first-hand experience, but I've spoken to many local people, and they said that everyone knew that it was happening. We're aware of it now because we're monitoring, and we can see the full extent of all the abuse that's going on. So the plan that I've taken now is I want the people that are responsible to clean up the water as quickly as possible. That is South West Water. I know that many of you will know that they've ring-fenced about 38 million for structural engineering work to happen. I want that to be brought forward. That will be one of my first jobs if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, is to get structural engineering financial package brought forwards. Now, at national picture, what I want to do is legislation will have a big part in this. We've heard about Ofwat, we've heard about the EA. We need to make sure they have proper sharp teeth to bite down on any of these water companies that are not playing by the rules. That may include being able to bring forward criminal convictions if there is clear signs of illegality.
10 seconds.
Yeah. And around pieces of any wrongdoing that is clear to be able to be seen. Now, one of the big parts that I'll come on to on many questions afterwards is the fact that we need proper planning review on this as well. They need to become a statutory consultee. We are building so much now in this part of the world, and we're not building the corresponding infrastructure. So we need to start thinking far more strategically and long-term about this.
Okay. I've seen a couple of hands go up. We took the executive decision not to take additional questions from the audience. However, I did hear the same thing a few times, which was basically you've had 14 years to fix this.
Yeah. I get it. I'm annoyed as well. Yeah.
Well, we've had Labour governments in that period as well, so we can blame them. And we've had
been many different.
But then let David answer the question. 14 years.
I'm with you on this. We've taken our eye off the ball on this massively. We all have. Okay, it's got to the point now because we are monitoring storm overflows in large part. We see now the full effects of all this going on. We need to source it as quickly as possible, and I can give you my honest approach that this is the first job that I want to get on with because look, I'm a former Royal Marine. I love swimming, and the fact that there's stuff in the moment is completely unacceptable.
Okay, Ollie Davey.
Thank you. I think surfers long before it became apparent from reading what the problems were. I think we knew there were problems with the sewage system. It's not a new problem. It's been going on, but governments have been asleep while it's been going on. It seems to me the only thing to do is bring it back into public ownership. And I knew at some point I'd end up agreeing with Gary. There may not be a lot we agree on, but that is one. The Green Party policy is also to bring all utilities back into public ownership. Whoever thought it was a good idea to sell off a utility that we all have to use? We can't choose. It's not a market. I can't go and say, do you know what, South West Water are doing a terrible job. I'm going to go and sign up to Eastern Water or whatever. You can't do it. So, oh, wait a minute, it was a Conservative government. And who's been in power for the last 14 years while they got away with years of underinvestment, paying out to shareholders, giving fat bonuses to their directors? A Conservative government who stripped down the Environment Agency to absolutely nothing. A Conservative government. And now they're promising to put it right. why don't I have much faith in that? So one of the things I'd like to do is beef up the Environment Agency, give them the teeth, give them the money, give them the resources, so that they can really say to South West Water, what are your plans? Let's see them. They're not good enough. Have another go. We need to see more investment in the infrastructure. Try doing more things to separate surface water overflows, sewage from the sewage.
10 seconds, please.
So that we separate them. We may have to have a moratorium on further development in East Devon. And I think investors should get minimal investment returns until this problem is fixed, and absolutely no bonuses for their directors and chief.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Peter. Ollie, because this is such an incredibly important topic, especially in this town and this area, we've spent a bit more time on this question than we will other questions. I also want to balance it up and put a question to Helen. Keir Starmer was all for renationalisation of everything a year or so ago, and now he's not. Why isn't Labour more bold in its action against the water companies?
Well, if and when Labour is in power, it will be bold, and that's the measures that we've set out. Renationalisation brings with it huge amounts of compensation that need to be paid for the shareholders. As I said, I don't want those shareholders to walk away with all the profits they've taken out of a degraded system, the consequences that we're left behind with, got free. So renationalisation, although it sounds good in theory, will mean that they can benefit from taking all of those profits and leaving you, the people, to pay for it. That doesn't seem fair to me, doesn't seem right to me, and I don't think that that's the way we should be using our finances right now. I think we need to be making, as I said, water companies clean up their act.
But if you can find that they've breached their charter, then why should you be rewarding failures?
I'm not rewarding.
No, but you're saying to renationalise it, you would have to pay them compensation.
It's just illegal.
Well, but if you said, well, you could challenge them on their contract, because I'm sure their contract didn't allow to say what you're allowed to pollute the waters. What kind of a contract would be written in that manner?
It would be having to buy out all the shareholders, so that would be a huge amount of money. So it's been looked into.
You would have to compensate. That is the law. You would have to compensate shareholders. She is correct.
Well, the model is wrong then, isn't it?
The model is what it is. We're going to end this topic now, but very quickly, hands up if you'd like to see the water companies renationalised. And those that wouldn't. Well, it wasn't unanimous, was it? It definitely wasn't unanimous.
David, can I come back in for 6
One quick one, yeah.
Yeah. It is really nuanced what you do. So a few months ago, the Liberal Democrats tried to put through Parliament a proposal for a bill which would immediately clamp down on this lack of monitoring. And that was voted down by the Tories. This was very recently, and it couldn't win the support of Labour. So we do need to, I think, focus primarily on what happens here in granular detail, what we can achieve here. I fear that the slightly, you can understand the appeal of saying nationalise it, but there are problems with that. It could end up going through the courts for 10 years, whereas perhaps setting up a public benefit company is a way of finding a middle ground through. Whatever the emergency presents itself here and now, not only in the sea, but in Exmouth and in Clisthoniton and everywhere else, where sewage is now popping up through the manhole.
Well, we're going to have to wrap this one up, I'm afraid. We're going to,
Can I come back on
you already had
something
2
you said?
goes. David wants one more go, 15 seconds, then we're going to
I
move
just want to say
on.
this really quickly on why I don't think renationalisation is a good approach right now. Having worked in the public sector and seen public finances they are now after the pandemic, after everything that's going internationally, if water was to be renationalised, with everything that's happened at the moment, with a need for increased defence spending, with NHS spending, with social care funding, if there isn't an environmental issue, it will be down at the lowest part. The fastest way to get this issue sorted out is to wrap a stronger regulation framework around South West Water and get them to invest in structural engineering.
Right, we're going to move on. That section took about twice as long as it should do, but I knew it would do. We're going to move on to everyone's favourite topic, which is Brexit. And we're going to keep this brief. This is a question from the live stream from Jess Nichols. I'm a first-time voter currently studying abroad in France. Brexit has made this so much harder. Can you give me one example of how Brexit has changed things for the better in the UK? Let's keep this quick. Let's keep this quick because you've only got it, and I only want one where Brexit has made things better, and even the people who don't want Brexit have to try and think of one. Right, we'll start with Helen. Can't think of one. You.
I thought I did the last
No, you do. No, Paul did the last one first.
one. Okay. Is there a good thing about Brexit? I'm really struggling to think of one. And I think the whole Brexit debate is really difficult. It's very divisive. And I think, well, I always said with Brexit, I had huge concerns about Brexit and how it could evolve. My biggest concern was being how it could evolve if it wasn't in the hands of the right government. And that's what we've seen play out as well. It's even more important without your EU rights to have the right people in power, protecting workers, having our environmental protections as well. So it's even more key to get people that you know are on your side in Westminster for you. In terms of anything that good that's come out of it, I find it really hard to see, but I do see it as a divisive debate. I think one thing has been that we have had to look at our skills shortage in this country and start looking at rebuilding skills, training people up for the skills shortage that we've got, and to make sure that children have good jobs for the future. We are going to, immigration has gone up, so we're going to, always rely on overseas worker who bring so much to our country as well. But I think that we have neglected our education system, making sure that it fits the future careers that children need to have.
Okay, we're going to keep this one brief, so that's a minute.
So that's one thing that I can think of, but it's very hard to think of any.
Gary. And you're only allowed to pick one, not like...
No. Like Alan said, it's a very divisive debate, and the vote was divisive, wasn't it? I mean, I wasn't particularly interested in...
But how has it improved things for anybody? How has Brexit improved things?
Well, Brexit hasn't been allowed to happen, hasn't it? It's Brino, remember? It's Brexit in name only. Okay, we are still tied by over 4,000 regulations. Remember, Mr. Sunak said he would, get rid of those. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Don't carry on.
Okay, so this is still something that needs to be done properly, so that we see if Brexit, the benefits of Brexit, okay, but it needs to be done properly, okay? If we...
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. It was a good... You paused and you gave me the opportunity to have your minute. Off you go.
So at this election, to my astonishment, I mean, Brexit isn't the elephant in the room, it's King Kong in the room. It is an absolute catastrophic shambles. The positive thing about it is that 8 years on, it has shown to us who the real liars are. But the failing of the main party leaders to call it out as a lie is the reason why every time you turn the news on, Nigel Farage is there. Because he's allowed to keep talking about Brexit like it was this great thing, because they're all terrified to talk about it. It costs us $100 billion a year in lost revenue. It's just been such a terrible, divisive thing. And I just think that for all this talk of we'll move closer to the EU, we'll renegotiate little bits, it's ridiculous. We should at least be joining the single market, if not reopening the debate. We know what happened. It was a lie. It's not worked.
David, one good thing about Brexit.
So to give some context, we had a referendum and it was the British people that voted to leave. And then it was government's job to enact that. That's democracy. As much as we like it, okay, or don't like it, that is what happened. We're 8 years on now. We need to heal from this and we need to find a way to make it succeed. Now, the world is not how it was in 2016, okay? There is a lot more volatility in the international system. Having the ability to be able to form domestic policy, whether that's around farming by the Common Agricultural Policy, being able to come up with better border protection, these are all things that we wouldn't be able to do. These are all true.
So can I just, I mean, we're not going to allow them to ask questions, but I know what they're thinking. 2010, net immigration was 252,000. The Conservative and Lib Dem government promised, David Cameron promised to get it down to 10,000, but 10,000 a year.
We'll have that conversation.
It's now currently 635,000.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have that conversation around migration and illegal immigration. But the position that I'm taking as someone who's coming into politics now is that after 8 years, of course, we were going to experience all of these hardships, having left a massive trading bloc that we were very, very closely linked to for many decades. We need to move on, and we need politicians that can make a success of the situation we're in now.
Well, it seems to me the only way we can move on is to get back as close as we can to the European Union. And I remind everyone that this place voted really strongly to leave. Well, not really strongly, some well, I mean, David is right. It was a referendum. I mean, it was disastrous. Following the referendum, wasn't it? If you're talking about it before, it definitely proved that government by referendum isn't a very good idea. It's a single question that people are very hopeless about. Plus, a total lackluster stay in campaign and an extremely vigorous leave campaign.
And what was on the
but as one of the phrases I learned when I became a councillor was, "We are where we are." Very quickly on, I think it was my first planning meeting. Yeah, well, you wouldn't start from here. Oh, we are where we are. We said we wouldn't start. And Brexit has been an absolute disaster, but we need to find ways to rejoin at least some kind of trading partnership in the European Union. And it seems to me that's the only way we can do it, is to remove the border controls that we've got at the moment and result in vast amounts of paper for relatively small, struggling businesses who suddenly find out to fill in most of the documents. And don't forget that our migration that took place at multiple times. Nobody, and thank God, nobody said the line, "We have our sovereignty back." I'm impressed with all of you for avoiding this. Slightly connected to Brexit, and also I want to keep this a bit.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Paul.
No, don't worry.
Sorry, Paul.
Don't worry. We Lib Dems are very.
You've got a long list of positives.
Would you like a little push?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, I want my country back. Where have we heard that before? And I tell you the country I want. I want my country 2012. I want to be back on the night I sat with my children and watched the Olympic opening ceremony when the values of this country, the true values of integration, culture, business, arts, economy, facing up to our history, Windrush and other things like that, music, the things we were great at, the things we are great at. And then this hideous virus has been introduced into the system, into our DNA, by people like Farage and others. Farage, who is not fit to run a whelk stall. Let us be clear about that. Farage, who is sucking up to a proto-fascist in Donald Trump, who is likely, if he's elected, to destroy the American Constitution. I want my country back. The night I watched the 2012 Olympics with my kids, and they looked at it and they thought, that's a country to be proud of. However, that said, I'll tell you what the Lib Dems are going to do. We're going to fix the UK's broken relationship with Europe, forge a new partnership built on cooperation, not confrontation, and move to conclude a new comprehensive agreement which removes as many barriers to trade as possible. There's tons of detail.
Isn't it still official Lib Dem policy to try and rejoin Europe?
Say that again?
It's still official Lib Dem policy to try and rejoin Europe.
You have to go through about 100 steps to get there. And do you know what? If I was a European leader at the moment, I'm not sure I'd want us back. We've got a lot of making up to do, a lot of humility to show before European governments are going to trust us again. And not only that, we've removed ourselves from the world stage. We were crucial in the stability of the country, of the continent. Look what Putin has done. Look what Putin was doing during the election, the referendum, Cambridge Analytica and all of that. We were manipulated. We were lied to by Gove and Johnson. What's the best thing about Brexit? They've gone.
Right. Moving on to a very different topic. Lisa Pike, somewhere. Where's Lisa Pike? All right.
Open Door Exmouth, a local charity supporting people most in need in the community, experienced a 60% increase last year compared to 2022 of people needing one-to-one help and support, and a staggering 777% increase in homelessness cases. We are feeding more people with free meals than ever before, and the shelves of our community fridge are emptied within hours of being full. The voluntary sector is experiencing more and more need and more referrals from statutory services with less and less funds. How do you intend to advocate for local charities who are no longer nice add-ons in a community, but are delivering essential services?
Gary.
Thank you, Helen. My inbox has been filled since I started this journey. Asking me to pledge to this and pledge to that. But there's obviously a lot of issues out there. There's a lot of deprivation. There's a massive cost of living crisis. Everybody is struggling. Where do you start?
I don't know, you tell us.
Yeah, exactly. Where do you start? It's broken, isn't it? Yes, but I don't have the solutions. We don't have the solutions, do we? Let's not just pretend that we have the solutions to this. There are a lot of problems, that affect our society. But one of the things I say to people is, what is it that you're prepared to do, or what is it that you can do as well to alleviate your situation? Yes, and what can we do to help you? But we haven't got all the answers. We need a debate. We need to look into ourselves. Perhaps, instead of just walking past your neighbours, sometimes just ask them, how can I help? A lot of us are in privileged positions, aren't we? And I think we've just forgot how to care for people.
Okay. Thank you. Dan.
I think this is a situation where it really pays to have an independent voice, because the problem is that we've had a Tory government and Tory MP that didn't want to say anything. And it's vital that we have a representative that speaks up on these issues. Open Door do amazing things. Claire Austin does amazing things at Exmouth Friends in Need. They shouldn't have to do these things. It's an absolute failure of government. And for it to really change, that's where it has to come from. It has to change at the top, because it's got such a massive effect. The problem is that people on benefits, people that are homeless, they are vilified by the government, they're vilified by the press. It's a huge, huge problem. But we need an MP that will speak up, because in 2010, you could have fitted everybody in the country who used the food bank in Arsenal's football stadium. Now it's greater than the population of the Southwest. It's too big. And the thing is that you have to have somebody who's going to speak up, because these stats are massive, but we've got individual cases, that really highlight the point. So I think we just need strong representation.
David?
Firstly, Lisa, thank you for all the work you do at Open Door. It's lovely to see all the charities working across Exmouth and East. I just want to raise the point that I know that everyone's struggling. I've gone through it, my family are going through it. We borrowed £400 billion from ourselves during the pandemic. 400 billion to keep everyone at home on furlough, make sure that people had what they need to survive through this really horrible thing that we've all gone through. 94 billion in cost of living support payments, energy price guarantee, national insurance contributions, pension triple lot protected. This is all money that we need to pay back. I understand that a lot of people are going through real difficulty at the moment. And for anyone that has fallen through the safety net of society, my door is always open and I will always help those people. But to answer Lisa's question, local charities, I've started to work already. I've started to go out and meet people in these local charities to see how I can give support going forward, because it is vitally important to our community.
Thank you. Ollie?
Well, despite the best efforts of Liz Truss, this is actually still one of the wealthiest countries in Europe. The problem is the wealth is not equally shared. We've got billionaires who even during the pandemic saw their wealth increase while they did absolutely nothing. So the answer is to start sharing that wealth around. They got filthy rich off the work of other people, but it's time some of it was handed back. So the Green Party's policy is that those with the broadest shoulders pay up the most. If you take out of the society you live in, you should put back as well. So I think we need more than just safety nets and, here's a little handout to keep you going. We need to really start changing the way that wealth in this country is distributed and the way businesses share the wealth that they create. And then, hopefully, we wouldn't need charities like the Open Door. There'll always be people, I'm sure, who, for whatever reason, fall on hard times. But the only way, really, is through taxation to make sure that the wealthiest pay their share. And not just on the income that they earn, but on the wealth that they accumulate. Green Party policy is to tax people on their accumulated wealth, not you and me on the value of our house, but on the highest earners who have billions in wealth, that would be taxed annually.
Okay, thanks very much. Next question is another one from the live. Oh, sorry, here we go. I keep doing that, don't I?
Well,
keep doing that.
Me and Helen now.
Paul, it's your go.
It is. And then Helen, don't forget her.
I know. I just saw that we were on 5 minutes. I thought
You're on your toes.
I've made up
That's all right.
time.
That's all right. First of all, I'd like to go back to what can be done in the locality. Sheer coincidence, I've got a meeting, a new chief executive of East Devon and the chief of CAB meeting tomorrow at Blackdown House. We've had lots of discussions about these issues. As a district council, it does matter. It's Lib Dem led in collaboration with other lovely people like Ollie down there as well. We've got a strong. Sorry.
I'm struggling to hear.
I'm slightly anyway. Sinusitis, I can't hear very well myself. So is that better?
Yeah, it is better.
Right. So at East Devon, we've got a very strong poverty strategy, and that allows us to do all sorts of things with discretionary work around council tax. We try and provide some intervention work for people who are presenting early, helping them to deal with things like bills, for example. So it's about how you address not just the causes, but the sort of existential moment before it gets worse. We have also, I think, if you go out of the council environment and you go to what Lib Dems are proposing to do, I think the key thing is to remove this cap on only 2 children can claim child benefit. It's absolutely absurd. Larger families are hugely discriminated against there. And I think the policy around pushing free school meals out further as well is incredibly important. In terms of how you address the underlying causes, that is a massive subject about inequality in our society, which I think David probably doesn't want me to start an essay on.
No, I don't want you to start another.
Okay.
Helen.
Well, thank you. Thank you for everything you're doing. And it's a lot for you to be dealing with, and it shouldn't be down to charities to help sort this out. This is fundamental. This is about the fundamental needs of people in society: food, shelter, warmth. How can people thrive if you don't have those basics? All our public services have been decimated. We know that. And the cost of living has gone through the roof. Liz Truss's mini budget, we call it, massive disaster. And it impacted all of us. So those costs that have gone through the roof, really impacting the most vulnerable. Some research, Citizen Advice shared the number of people going up whose outgoings are more than their incomings as well. So the amount of debt that people might get into as well. This is just common what's happening across the board. So having to look at this and thinking about what we can do to support it. So it's making sure that we can bring those costs down, have cheaper energy. So Great British Energy, it's about having cheaper, cleaner, greener energy for people to use so that we're not as impacted by those rises in costs there. Also making sure that there's housing, building more housing to support people, and affordable housing, genuinely affordable housing that people can access. Making sure that work pays. A lot of people who are really struggling are working. And that's the shocking thing. So having a real living wage, but managing those costs as well. Health, sometimes people are out of work because they can't work. And we're having to wait on waiting lists. So to cut down some of those waiting lists and have 40,000 more appointments. Dentistry, that's got to be addressed as well. More appointments in dentistry. These are all in the manifesto, fully costed, fully funded pledges. Education, children going to school, not being able to think about what they're doing at school. We're going to put in place free breakfast clubs for all children. So we set their days up right, sort the education system out. So it's not just their days, it's their futures that we're sorting out as well. Okay. We're also taxing the wealthiest people by looking at non-dom tax status.
So I'm going to have to, you can't read out the entire manifesto.
Okay.
We still have made up some time, so that's, and I'll try not to forget this side. Right, the environment. This is from the live stream from Emily Dixon. Tackling the climate crisis has continually been pushed down the national agenda, even with 2030, the year many climate targets are due to be reached, only 6 years away. Asking as a young person, she's a young person, fearing for her future and her children's future, what plans do you have to accelerate the UK's progress? What steps will you take to ensure policy decisions prioritise reducing emissions and supporting climate justice? Let's start with Dan.
So, as your MP, obviously I wouldn't have the capacity to change climate change, but I would vote for the strongest measures to end climate change, because we saw from COVID that once mankind was taken out of the picture, the planet thrived. So we absolutely have to make serious changes. The £28 billion Green Deal that Labour did have, I thought was brilliant. Obviously, that's been reneged on now, which is very disappointing. But now we've got the GB Energy, which it sounds good, but I am concerned that will be reneged on as well. So I would absolutely advocate for the environment, but I do have concerns that the future Labour government isn't going to be that much hotter than the current Conservative government. It's a massive concern. But I would always speak up for the environment. I would never vote against anything green or animal welfare.
That was 50 seconds, so that would be great, David.
Brilliant. So climate change, you don't need me to tell you this, is the biggest threat that we all face. If we don't decarbonise our atmosphere, we are all in hot water, literally. So there are many things that we can do locally as individuals that I will always promote, cutting down on journey times and looking at your own carbon footprint. But nationally, this legislation needs to be coming from the government. And we've done a lot to decarbonise since 1990. We're well ahead of the pack compared to our European partners and to the rest of the international community. But more needs to be done as well. The way I see it is that we, as a country, could do really well from this. We have some of the best minds in the UK. We can start looking at green technologies, whether that be offshore floating wind, carbon capture and storage. These are all technologies we can build here and export around to the rest of the world. So we can still grow as an economy with everything that's going on. But internationally, what we really need to do is play our part on the world stage to bring the biggest emitters, places like China, like India, Indonesia, Nigeria, the United States, to work with them to make sure that they reduce their carbon emissions as well. Because unless we all work together internationally, then none of it works at all. So that's what I'll be doing. If I am fortunate enough to be elected, that is something I really want to get on with, because if we don't sort this, we are in trouble.
Ollie, everyone else has done it in less than a minute. Your go.
Thank you. Well, I realised a long time ago I was living on a finite planet with finite resources, and I'd better start doing something about it. And that was before we really recognised climate change. But way back when I was a young man as well, I read James Lovelock, and I learned about positive feedback, which isn't as good as it sounds, which is that if you start depleting the ice caps and so on, then you increase global warming even faster. And that is what we are in danger of getting into, a positive feedback loop. As a musician, I know all about feedback anyway. One of the Green Party's policies is to bring in a carbon tax. So you tax the carbon that people are using. Stop fossil fuel expansion. We have to leave it in the ground. We just have to. And some of the other parties are not prepared to grasp that nettle. They're saying, oh, no, we need to carry on extracting oil for a little bit longer. We need a massive investment in renewables. One of the first things David Cameron did when he came into power was get rid of or massively reduce the subsidy that you got for putting solar panels on your house. And immediately, the local industries that depended on that work just went out of business. And let's not hang around for the technological fix, please. Carbon capture and storage, all that, yes, some of it exists, but the technologies we need are here now. We just need to start using them.
Okay, thank you. Paul.
So we need to look at the local picture. Again, it's very significant what we can actually do in our own backyard. There are some paradoxes. Exeter Airport, fossil fuels being burnt out of gas engines. They are trying to generate new forms of green energy there as well. We need to try and look at that. As Ollie said, we need to bring back a form of subsidy and encouragement around solar panels, around installing heat pumps. At East Devon, we have policy. When I first became leader 4 and a bit years ago, I sort of sound like a godlike figure, but I created a portfolio role called Climate Action. And what that does, that cabinet member, is through her, everything that we do gets sifted to see if it's compliant. Probably genuinely, if you were writing an article about where we live, you'd look at the district heating system in Cranbrook, and if there has to be a new town, you would then have to see how that can be made to work better, because that is a way of using renewable energy and coming off fossil fuels, although at the moment it's quite dependent on gas-fired backup. So we need to see what we can do on our own back door. The good news is that your waste and recycling fleet has, I think, the 4th or 5th best record in the United Kingdom for everything you do when you get your green bags and your green bucket and all the rest of it, and you put your little pot for your food too. That is working superbly here. That really matters. So thank you for that.
Okay, Helen.
As a mother, I am really worried too about our future. And David, I don't see this as an opportunity. I see it as a disaster that we should be leading the way on addressing. What the Labour Party have got plans to do is have Great British Energy, so a state company that will reduce our energy, invest in clean, green energy, keeping our bills down as well. Investing in solar and wind, offshore and onshore wind, making sure we're getting that clean, green energy. We have to change planning to do that. So we've looked at what we need to do to actually make things happen when Labour are in power. And also, how are we going to invest? How are we going to deal with this? We also need to get those oil and gas businesses that have that windfall tax while we're paying our huge energy bills to pay for this. So making sure we have that windfall tax for oil and gas companies as well. I think we need to think about nature when we talk about the environment and make sure that we're preserving nature as well, looking at how we're using land, if we're building houses, green and brownfield first, and really thinking about how we can insulate homes as well. And I will prioritise the environment. It's a key focus for me.
Thank you. So I can't let that go. I know we're short time, but I'll make it up. 28 billion.
What was that, sorry?
You dumped the 28 billion pledge.
Well, we haven't dumped that. We've actually had to be more recognising where we're at with our economy. And that's one of the biggest things you'll notice about the Labour Party. It's easy to say what you will do when you're not going to be in government. We want to be really secure with the finances. We want to make sure that it is fully funded, it's costed, that we can afford to do it. And there is so much more that I would want to do and that I would push for if I was your voice in Parliament as well. But we have to think about what we can do and prioritise. And that is because of 14 years of the Tories and what they've done to our country.
We've heard that one a lot. Gary?
Climate change is inevitable, isn't it? Yeah. So our emissions, we're down to 1%, but let's not fool ourselves. Yes, we blame the Chinese, the Indians for exacerbating the situation, but actually off-storing ours. We're off to them, aren't we? We all wear materials that are made in China. We all wear clothing that's made in India, yes? So we're just pushing the problem over to another part of the country, another part of the world. We've done quite a lot. Everybody here has just talked about all the initiatives we've got in play or that we will have in play. But this race to net zero is at a cost. We have a lot of solar farms around us. We're surrounded by them, but that's taken up valuable farmland, isn't it? And we've got to remember we do have to support ourselves in terms of eating as well. Okay, and this race towards net zero, we really need to think about it and have a proper discussion about it. Because if we just concentrate on that, then we're all going to be net poorer.
Okay. There are plenty of things to say, but we are running out of time. I just want to remind everyone, with the questions are picked from what the most popular topics were, where we got the most questions. Is Eleanor Scott here?
Talking to you. I'd like to know the candidate's stance on Gaza. Did they support a ceasefire now?
Did you all get that? Basically, do you all support a ceasefire now? What's your policy on the situation in Israel, Gaza. We all start with David.
So this is my background. I've worked in international relations for a long time. The situation is horrible. You don't need me to tell you that. The attacks on the 7th of October that Hamas carried out against Israel are unthinkable. Israel have gone to a position now where they are losing international support because some of the raids that they're starting to do in places like Rafah. And I think they are starting to be aware of that. And I hope they take guidance from the international community to act within the legal framework. The big question around the ceasefire, and we're not talking about Palestine and Israel here, we're talking about Hamas, which is a proxy of Iran, and Israel. If there was a ceasefire now, what happens to Hamas? Are they past that process? And what happens to all the hostages, the Israeli hostages, that are still in capture? Those are the questions that we need to iron out first of all, before we talk about any ceasefire. I want this to end as quickly as possible, but I just do not see a position where Hamas has a part to play in that.
Yeah, that was bang on a minute. If we can all do that, that would be greatly appreciated. Ollie.
Yes, we do need a ceasefire now. What's happening in Gaza is absolutely appalling, as was the Hamas attack. But Hamas is a terrorist organisation, and Israel's war aims of defeating Hamas, we should know by now, you can't defeat a terrorist organisation. It is rooted, it is part of the fabric of that society. So you can't fight it. You have to end up negotiating it, as we did in this country with the IRA. In the end, and I was reading Patrick Coburn at the weekend, he said, all wars come to an end eventually. And we do. We need it to stop, and we need Hamas and Israel to talk to each other. They may do it through a third party. They may be kind of shouting at the third party to say this or say that, but it can be done.
Okay.
It has to be done for the sake of the people of Gaza. And Israel.
Paul.
Yes, so this is a vile humanitarian catastrophe playing out every day. We're witnessing it and we're feeling absolutely powerless. So the Liberal Democrat policy is absolutely clear. We are calling for an immediate bilateral ceasefire. That would, of course, include ensuring that the hostages are brought out. And we need to create some breathing space here so that we can go back. Anybody remember the two-state solution? That was where we were headed, wasn't it, before we got the Netanyahu sort of rightist side of Israel coming forward. It needs to be based, that two-state solution, on the 1967 borders, and it needs to provide security and dignity for the Israelis and the Palestinians. And as Ollie has just said, this is tough, but look what happened in Ireland, look what happened in South Africa, look what happened in Vietnam. North Korea, of course, and South Korea are still at war. I mean, that's an exception that proves the rule. We do need to get there, but our clear policy is an immediate bilateral ceasefire.
Thank you. Helen.
I'm absolutely horrified by what we're seeing, but we cannot and we should not avert our eyes. I support an immediate ceasefire in Gaza alongside the release of all Israeli hostages taken by Hamas on the 7th of October. Also, we need to have unimpeded humanitarian access into Gaza as well. Labour has been calling for immediate ceasefire, immediate release of all hostages for months now. We need to renew that peace process. We need to take the opportunity and have that international pressure to do so. Having that two-state solution, recognising a Palestinian state plus a safe Israel as well. And if Labour forms the next government, we would be committed to playing our part to help with that.
Thank you. Gary?
23 years in the army, 10 years in the Foreign Office, 7 years at Joint Force Intelligence Group. We seem to have been fighting wars forever, in my lifetime anyway. But one thing I haven't heard of for a long time, and I can remember from my early days as a soldier. I don't seem to hear the words peace envoy. I don't seem to hear the words blue helmets. Where are the United Nations? They are a strong force. They are a strong organisation. Why are the United Nations not flooding Gaza with blue helmets? Why are peace corps around the world, diplomatic services, not flooding that area with diplomats and just making sure and insisting they are not leaving? That is their job after all, okay? To bring peace, to speak. Jaw, not war. That is and of course, yes, I do support a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire, but send the blue helmets in and send diplomats in from all nations.
I'm hearing murmurings, and I think I'm picking up the right things, but maybe the blue helmets and other aid agencies don't want to go in because they've seen the Israelis kill people wearing blue helmets and aid agency badges. Right? Okay. Dan?
I absolutely back a ceasefire. It's an absolute no-brainer. Why on earth would you not want the killing of innocent civilians to stop? Obviously, a ceasefire is temporary. That's the only problem. It has to be followed up with peace. And unfortunately, that requires a strong US president, which I don't feel we have. And if Donald Trump becomes the next US president, pretty confident that will be the end of Palestine. I think that our leaders have been pretty tame. They're now getting to the point where they're starting to talk more strongly because Netanyahu is out of control. There's no doubt in my mind he's a war criminal, and Hamas are terrorists as well. But the way Israel have conducted themselves is appalling. Carpet bombing refugee camps. That's not Israel defending itself. That's genocide. And I think for our part, we should not have been selling arms to Israel. And I think a big part of supporting Israel was because we sold them arms. And, it's a common thing that we don't like it when we get floods of refugees heading towards us, but frequently they've been made homeless by British bombs, and we have to address that.
Next question from another young person, Kerry Enkus, who's on the live stream, on youth employment. How would you ensure that young local people from secondary school age and upwards have the education, training and employment opportunities that allow them to stay in the area or move back to the area they grew up in? The transport networks are poor, schools are crumbling, the house prices are too high, and any agencies and services that should be supporting them are underfunded. Do you care about the future generation? Ollie, and we are 10 minutes from the end, so let's go for it.
Okay. I was brought up in southwest Scotland, and everybody who got any kind of education immediately moved out of the area unless they came back as a doctor, a solicitor, or a teacher. That was pretty much it. So I have seen this at first hand. And when I moved to East Devon, I realised the same thing was happening. Expensive housing and a constant drain of young people moving.
The question is, do you care about the future generation? You just answered that.
Yeah. So we need to make sure that we have thriving local economies where local people have a voice in what happens, that we support small and medium businesses that can offer opportunities for young people so they get the employment. We have to fix the housing market, and I'm surprised we haven't had a question about housing. So
housing is included
young
in
people afford a home, stay. At least we need better control so that people can rent reasonably within the area. And we need to make sure that the local economy stays local. And
okay, I'm going to have to stop
the money that is generated stays in the local area.
Before you get going, Paul, we've got 2 more questions after this and 8 minutes to go.
Okay, I'll be as quick as I can. Thank you. So we need, first of all, to fix education as fast as we can. There's some amazing work. I'm sure a lot of people in Exmouth and the constituency are grateful for this at Exeter College, where people go for higher education and then for apprenticeships. We need to fund that better. We need, in terms of the education sector itself and schools, sorry? Yeah, no, and thank you very much to the. Well, I was glad to open one of the wings here a few weeks ago. Thank you for queuing me up for that. But of course, Exmouth College, but that takes you to 18. We need to skill up beyond that. We haven't got enough apprenticeship schemes to be able to keep people locally. There is obviously the housing crisis is probably mostly.
I have to interrupt you.
Oh, well, very quickly, the housing crisis is about the lack of social housing, the lack of council housing. We have got to build more of that. And the Liberal Democrat policy is to end the right to buy. My council is trying to do more of that. It needs help from sector.
Okay, Helen.
Absolutely support the future generation. That's why I'm here as a mother of 2 children, one in secondary school, one just about to start secondary school. We do need to invest in our education system. But even before that, in our early years, the critical time, 0 to 5, where children really need their input and have been failed because you can't access it. People can't access nurseries. We're putting in place 3,000 more nurseries so people can access that at that really critical time. Education system needs to be much a broader curriculum. We're going to listen to experts about that, not Michael Gove, who's ruined the education system. I'm not even allowed to say his name, they're teachers, so I'm really sorry for doing that. Bringing in the arts, culture, digital, and making it inclusive. So many children being failed at Devon who've got special educational needs and disabilities. Need to sort that out. We need better skills and careers advice. I grew up in Devon. It wasn't there for me. I moved away and I'm back because this is the place I want to live and lived here with my children. I want to bring them up. We need mental health support for children. There's a crisis, an epidemic for children there. And we care so much about the young people that we're giving people a vote from 16 because what they say matters.
Okay, we'll leave it there on that one. Gary?
Yeah, this is a soft subject for me. You just touched on mental health, and that is a massive thing. 2 of my young nephews, have committed suicide since lockdown. Okay, we need to get the children, we need to improve mental health services, as you say. There are a lot of children who have not gone back to school since lockdown. So if they're not in school, they're not learning, okay? If they're not learning, then they're not developing skills. So I'm all in favour of more apprenticeships locally. Invest in the local infrastructure. And I think we also need to accept that not every child aspires to academia. I think we should look at encouraging those that feel a life of academia after a certain age, maybe 14, 15, is not for them. If we want to put them, if they want to learn a trade, then make more apprenticeships available to younger people so that they can get into the workplace earlier with usable skills.
Dan?
So I talk to a lot of young people. I recently taught at Picton College, and young people are so disenchanted. I mean, look around this room. There's not many people here under 25. I mean, you all look good for your age, don't get me wrong, but I don't think there'll be many watching at home because they're not being listened to. One of the biggest concerns that the young people I spoke to was the planet. They were so concerned about the environment, and they just weren't hearing anything back. They don't see their reflection in our politics. And what's the main things that are discussed? The triple lock. How often is anything discussed about opportunities for young people apart from let's make them all join the army and it's all
I think quick while you're ahead.
But I just think that it's It's a stick to beat them with. And we have to have opportunities for young people. I've got 4 small children in Exmouth, and I don't want them to move away as they get older. I want them to be able to have opportunities here and thrive. It's not hard, is it?
David, as Dan said, the Tories want national service, whether that's in the army or whether that's as form of community service. What are the Tories giving back to the young people?
So this is an issue that I'm very passionate about, and if I am fortunate enough to be elected, that I'm going to really, really focus on. Now, I grew up under a Labour government, and one of the defining policies that have sort of stuck in my mind from childhood is Labour's policy for 50% of school leavers to go to university. Now, we all want more education, of course we do, but there was no thought about what the jobs market looked like afterwards, and then who was going to pay for this big upscale in degrees. For most of my generation, they haven't ended up using the degrees that they went to university for. And all that's happened is they've taken massive amounts of debt on, and it's pushed back things like being able to buy a house or start a family. For me, we need to normalise and bring back at scale apprenticeship schemes. I was really happy to see the manifesto page bring back 100,000 apprenticeship schemes. Practically here across Exmouth and Exeter East, I want local businesses to understand how to bring those people on. And I want to do a much better job at linking local people up, whether they're coming from Exmouth Community College or Exeter College, with those local companies. That's what I see my role as, bringing these groups together, whether through the Chambers of Commerce, different businesses, so that young people here can see a clear route to a really happy life and a successful life without having to pay massive amounts of money for a degree if they don't need it.
I knew we'd never finish on time, so we still have 2 questions to go. The last question is very quick, and then we all give you your final minute. This question, however, is not a 30-second answer, but try and keep it within a minute. Debbie Hogben. We can't hear you at all yet.
Is that better?
It is.
You talk about tax cuts as a positive commitment. However, I'm left wondering this. Surely the most important commitment to society is a well-funded NHS, which works for all. A well-funded social care system for the vulnerable. Adequate local dentists. Well-maintained roads. Schools well-maintained, so allowing our children to concentrate on learning. Investing in our young people with work opportunities, supporting families and developing a compassionate society for all, to name a few things. What plans do you have to kickstart these activities, and why are tax cuts considered so important and needed?
This one. Sorry. This is the broken Britain and nothing works in Britain. Everyone's had a go first. Who would like to take this one on first?
Was this about care primarily?
This is about NHS, care, potholes, broken Britain.
So, so to be very honest with all of you, when Ed Davies started splashing around in rivers and whatever and falling off children's equipment, I was pretty hacked off because he was my leader. And then about a week ago, he came out with one of the best party political broadcasts there's ever been when he described his own experience as a carer. And so the Liberal Democrats have committed absolutely to fund social care to the full as is required and as is needed. And we would introduce free personal care. That's based on the model that's already existing in Scotland. We would create a social care workforce plan. And also, because this is such a massive problem and nobody has got to grips with it, we need to establish a cross-party commission. What are we going to do with this? Election after... As far as the NHS is concerned, I'm appalled to have seen Conservative candidates elsewhere in Hustings kicking the local NHS trust because we're funding it, but they're not delivering it. Well, Dr. Sarah Woolston Wollaston, who I've got a measure of respect for, a former Conservative, who was the chair of the Devon NHS Trust. She resigned last week saying, no, that's it. I cannot do it. I cannot be kicked around by this government anymore. Let's face it, it's going to be, if not a constituency Labour member, it's going to be a Labour government. And I really hope, I really look forward genuinely to hearing what Helen will say about this. It's the biggest issue in our time. How do we save the NHS from those terrible 2012 Lansley reforms, which were basically the highway to privatisation?
I was just going to say, shall I read the question? I'm not sure they all heard it.
No.
You talk about tax cuts as a positive commitment. However, I am left wondering this. Surely the most important commitment to society is a well-funded NHS which works for all, a well-funded social care system for the vulnerable, adequate local dentists, well-maintained roads, schools, you name it, let's fix it. What plans do you have to kickstart these activities, and why are tax cuts considered so important and needed? I mean, I'll give you another...
Well, I'll wrap
to be
10
honest,
seconds on that.
Yeah.
They're not important. We shouldn't be cutting tax. End of story.
I don't think Labour says it's putting tax up. Is it cutting tax?
So we're, for working people, keeping tax as it is in terms of income tax, VAT, national insurance. We're not increasing those costs because they're the highest they have been for 70 years. And it really is impacting people, those costs. I think you're absolutely right to ask those questions, though, around why is it always talking about tax cuts? Let's see what we're getting for the tax that we're paying. And that is, under the Tories, all those public services you mentioned not being invested in, not being sorted. You're right, Britain is broken. And it's not the country I want to hand over to my children, or that any of us should want to hand over to our future generations, which is why we've got a serious plan to look at all those things that you mentioned across the board, make the changes where we can, and instead of cutting tax for the wealthiest, actually tax more people who can afford to be taxed. Those with non-domicile status who live here, use those services.
Okay. Gary?
Yeah, I agree with Helen about the non-dom situation. It's unsustainable. But in terms of tax cuts, well, with the NHS, because we need more staff, so we need to incentivise them. And if we can incentivise people to come into the NHS, so we've got more doctors and nurses, and take that millstone around from their neck, that where they're at the end of their training, you know, they've got a huge debt. If we can help them in that way, then I think that's a positive tax cut.
Dan?
You can't have low tax and strong public services. It's as simple as that. I don't support this ridiculous, endless thing about tax cuts. And it's the major parties not doing what's best for us, just looking to appease the Daily Mail. And it's not good enough. I support the closing of non-dom loopholes, but really it's not enough. It's not going to raise enough money. The top 5% of wealthy people have seen their wealth drastically increase since COVID. There's absolutely no reason why we're not taxing them, and that would make a huge, huge difference to public services.
David, the Tories are promising tax cuts, but they're not telling us the impact on public services. So tell us now, reveal all.
So the big thing for me, and no one's mentioned it yet, is that we talk constantly about cutting the pie in ever smaller pieces. We are on the precipice now of a technological revolution where we, having some of the smartest people in the world here, have the opportunity to be able to grow our economy in frontier technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, green technologies that we've talked about. This is how we fund our public services. It's not by cutting the pie ever smaller. It's by growing our economy, investing in entrepreneurship, getting them into a position where they can export. We've done it many times in our national history, and we can do it again. And that's exactly what I'll be backing. Yeah.
Should we be focusing on bringing a new Silicon Valley of AI here before we fix the roads?
Look, I understand all these frustrations, okay? I'm with you. I drive over the same roads. I use the same NHS services. No one wants to talk about this, and I think we've moved on from it. But we've just gone through a really expensive pandemic. No one wanted it, okay? No one wanted it. But we have borrowed 400, I say that number, £400 billion ourselves that we need to pay back.
Okay, we were doing so well. Ollie.
The problem with tax cuts is the more you earn, the wealthier you are, the less you pay proportionately. So it's not you and me who benefit from a tax cut, it's the wealthy people that you're not even going to see. And what's the point of a tax cut if you have to pay for your own dental care, you have to pay for your NHS treatment? Because the waiting list is so long that you have to remortgage your house in order to get a new hip. It's not economic sense to offer tax cuts to people. And as Dan has said, you can't get something for nothing. You know, if you want a thriving NHS, if you want good dental care, then you've got to be able to pay for it. And the only way to do that is through taxation.
Ollie, I've put questions to nearly everyone. I think Dan is the only one I haven't. But do the Green Party thinks households that earn £50,000 are rich, don't they?
Sorry.
Because you want to tax people more if they earn £50,000 or more.
Yes.
So you think £50,000 is rich?
Well, it's more than I earn. It's more than I've ever earned. I don't think 50,000 probably these days would be considered vastly wealthy, but you're going to be pretty well off. If you're earning 50,000, you are well able to pay for most things and quite a lot left over.
I'm pretty sure there's people in this room who do earn 50,000 and are struggling.
Well, good luck
and you want
to
to tax them more.
But I don't see why they shouldn't pay their fair share then. If you're in a job that's paying you over 50,000...
The fact is the Greens are going to tax everyone a lot, aren't they? So you're going to penalise people a lot on tax.
Sorry,
You've got the highest tax burden of anyone in those charts. I think it's £150 billion worth of tax.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot of tax.
It is a lot of tax, but there's a lot...
And you think people who are already struggling can bear that?
Well, we need to invest in this country and we need the income to do it. We need taxation to do it. And I've always felt, if you said to the people of this country, I'll be honest with you, I'm going to put 1p on your tax and you're going to get a health system that works, then most people would say, yeah, fair deal, and vote for it.
Last question, and I apologise for pronouncing your surname incorrectly in advance. Lou Delinsny? Delinsny, is that correct?
Dolichny.
Oh, close.
Right, I moved here to Exmouth a few years ago, and I love the sense of community. But what I love most is being able to go swimming, sailing, paddleboarding whenever I want to, pollution allowing. What motivates you to be our MP, and what do you love most about being in this constituency?
This is a 30-second answer. Who's starting this time? We'll start from the other end. We'll start with Ollie.
So, what do I love most?
What do you love most about Exmouth?
About the area. I've always made people laugh because I've always said the great thing about Exmouth is it's easy to get out of, which always sounds like a bit of a backhanded compliment.
Well, this
what I meant was you can go in any direction. I can have the delights of Exeter by train or bus, and I can walk. I can walk in many directions, and I don't have to walk very far before I'm right out on the East Devon Way, along the cliffs, up the estuary. Every day I walk into town, well, not every day, but every time I do it, I think how privileged I am to live next to this estuary and walk along it. So Exmouth has so much to offer in terms of its natural resources and its proximity to the estuary. It's a wonderful resource and we all ought to enjoy it.
Okay. David, what motivates you to be our MP and what do you love most about the constituency?
So I feel a deep grounding to this part of the world. My dad's side go back to the 1780s in Budley and Bicton. Said to you, this is where I really sort of came into my own in the Royal Marines, being tested up on the common out in the estuary. I feel a deep grounding to this place. But most of all, it's our people. Our people are fantastic. There is so much going for this area. And what I really see my role being, if I am fortunate enough to be elected, is to unlock all that potential.
Okay. Dan?
So my motivation comes from my kids. Before I had kids, I always felt that whatever government we had, I would be all right, that I could survive. And then we had twin girls. And then when they were 18 months, we had another girl on the way. And I thought, oh my God, what world are they coming into? And I felt that I owed it to them to do something about it. And that set me on this journey. And I love where we live. My kids would say to you, we live on holiday. And that's how I always view this constituency. As much as I like all the tourists that come from other parts of the country, nobody goes for 2 weeks holiday in Birmingham or Manchester, So I love this part of the world. But then what motivates me as well, now that I've got more involved and I became a councillor, is all the fantastic people who step up and do great things. Some of them we've heard about tonight. And, now I get inundated with emails from people really struggling. I've got 4 housing casework issues at the moment, and it is heartbreaking. And honestly, it keeps you awake at night. And you are not, as a councillor, you don't have great powers, but you do all you can. And that's what motivates me. I want to help people.
Gary.
I'm standing because I lived a quiet life, okay? But when the system as it is started affecting my children, I just thought, I'm not happy about this. My children were 9, okay? And I felt that they were being sexualized at school, okay, by this new ideology that was coming in and alongside other parents. And so that was unacceptable to me. And when I contacted my local MP, I didn't even get a reply out of them, other than an automatic reply, and neither did any of the other parents. So I reached out to Beth, told me straight away what was happening. She said that the Department of Education had been infiltrated by various organisations, and we are trying to do something.
So this has got literally nothing to do.
So that is
why. Sorry. This has literally got nothing
me
to do with the question.
What motivates me to become an MP and to change that system.
MP.
Yes. Well, yes, exactly.
And what
because
do you like about the
this is
constituency?
what is happening in schools, okay? And then alongside other parents, you need to be aware of this, okay? And what motivates me about this area? Well, I did my commando training here. Who wouldn't want to live here? I'm a Chiefs supporter. I'm not exactly in this area. I'm more at the east end of it. I used to be in the constituency before the boundary changed, but I can't do anything about that now. So I live towards East Devon. But the whole constituency is a wonderful place to live. And before I moved here, I was coming here on holiday.
Helen.
Okay, thanks for the question. All those activities you mentioned, I love doing those too. Beautiful area. I grew up in rural coastal part of Devon, in North Devon. I knew I wanted to bring my children up here. We mentioned our children, a lot of us. Some of these things, hard to do with your kids now. You worry about them getting sick. Key motivator for me, getting involved as well. This area has got so much potential. We're lucky to live here, but it could be so much better, not just for our kids, but for us as we age as well. I've faced a number of questions about being a mum doing this. You don't get many people being mums, going to Parliament, and the question to me, what makes a good mum? Well, for me, that's fighting for a better future for not just my children, but all children. And I want to create an inclusive society where people are respected, whoever they are, whatever their background, and that they can thrive. And I think diverse voices need to be heard in Parliament. People say politicians are all the same. I couldn't feel any more different than the people we have in power at the moment. As a state-educated mother who grew up in Devon, I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it for service.
So I think I first came to Exmouth in 1968 when my parents, there was somebody called Uncle George who was a Bible salesman. So that was a slightly strange.
This is going to be a long story. So
David, I could have probably finished this like that without an interruption. 1981, I used to come running on the beach during the time of Chariots for Fire when I used to get the train down from Exeter University. But mainly now, which is less colourful, I'm up to my neck in Exmouth. So we have a placemaking plan. What that has principally done is stop the rotten plans that the Tories had for Exmouth beforehand. We've introduced an open committee where people can come and meet and discuss what the future of Exmouth is. At the moment, I'm intimately involved in, you'll all have noticed, the seawall. Unfortunately, again, climate change. The sands have washed away. It's exposed the seawall. It's exposed the seawall around Sideshore, actually. So we've had to intervene there. So what motivates me? Getting things done in Exmouth and being able to advocate for it for larger funding at central government, which at the moment the Conservatives have failed to do.
Okay.
That's all the questions. We have run significantly over time. I'll take them. I wanted to make sure all the questions we had were put to the panel. I wanted to give them an opportunity to, as much as possible, answer them properly. So now we go in reverse order as we did at the beginning, with their final minute, and it is a minute. We start with Helen.
Thank you for all your questions today. What is clear, there's so much that needs to change. After 14 years, that change needs to happen soon. We have a once-in-a-generation chance to stop the chaos. Labour has a fully funded, costed, serious plan with first steps as a mission-based government with a focus on serving people. I want to be part of that government and represent you to deliver economic stability and sustainable growth that benefits us all, to prioritise our environment and have cost-effective green energy and hold our water companies to account, to rebuild our NHS, to smash barriers to opportunity for all our children, to tackle antisocial behaviour, but to also look at our justice system, which we haven't talked about tonight, but which is crumbling as well. We can build a better Britain, not one of division and decline, but with hope and unity. But you can't just hope for change. You have to vote for it. So on the 4th of July, I ask you to vote with your hearts and vote for me so I can represent you in Parliament. I'm about people and policy, not polls. But if you look at the polls, it's either voting for Labour or more of the same.
I knew this would come up and I promised I'd clarify it. Helen has said that basically you either vote for Labour or you get Tories. The polls are very confused around this constituency. Nobody knows who's in second place. There's a fair idea who's in first place, but that's not even certain. The Claire Wright, everyone will know Claire Wright. Nobody knows where her votes are going. So this is truly a pretty unknown race, and I think all the candidates would accept that. There are websites that put Lib Dems in second place. There are polls that put Labour Party in second place. Nobody knows is all I'm telling you.
They put themselves in the front. So see it, David.
Right. Ollie.
Well, you've heard from all of us. Now you've got a choice about how to use your vote. And whatever you do, use it. And don't forget your voter ID. Under the first past the post-electoral system that we persist with in this country, despite its obvious unfairness, you probably have to resort to tactical voting for the least worst option, rather than know that your vote is going to deliver MPs whose views actually align with yours. But if you want to send a clear message to those who will take power after this election, that you want to see real changes in our NHS, our housing stock, our energy policy, our rivers and seas, and in the restoration of our wildlife, as well as a serious attempt to reach net zero, it's not a race, it's more of a crawl at the moment, then please vote Green for real hope and real change.
David.
On the 4th of July, we all have a big decision to make about the future of our home and our country. Now, I know that we've been through a difficult time over the last couple of years. We've talked about the pandemic and we've talked about war breaking out. But we are turning a corner, and I know that things are starting to improve. It's very clear from what Labour have said, both locally and nationally, that the approach of elect us first and we'll tell you what we'll do afterwards is not good for our democracy. And for the Lib Dems and Reform, it's easy to say anything you want when you know you're not going to be held accountable to hold that view in government. The only reason I'm getting into politics is to improve our home. That's as simple as that. And I hope that over the last year, I've been able to demonstrate to all of you that I'm up to the job to represent us. If I am fortunate enough to be elected as your Member of Parliament, please let me tell you that that weight of responsibility will always rest very heavily on my shoulders, and I will always hold myself accountable to you. I have an energy to improve our home, and I'm ready to get on with the job now. Thank you, and I look forward to meeting many of you on the campaign trail.
I think it's you next, Paul, isn't it? Yes,
is that
you.
me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you, David. Well, other people have raised this. It was the other elephant in the room, apart from Dan raising Brexit. I think it was a very good thing to do. Yes, the elephant is, how are you going to vote? How are you going to tactically vote? And where you should do that. The most recent evidence, electoral evidence in the last year in this constituency, is that 39% of votes, the gentleman in front doesn't seem to want the evidence, but I'm going to give it to him anyway. 39% of people voted for local councillors who are Lib Dems. 13% voted for Labour. Okay, that does not indicate. I'm glad to hear a little bit of piping up from the Momentum crowd over there, but those are the facts. Those are the facts. You may not like them. So if you wish to tactically vote and you don't wish to have David, and if you do, then why not? Good luck to you. It is absolutely clear. The maths says you need to vote Lib Dem. Last line I'll say, David. It's called...
Okay, time.
It may not be all over Facebook on the Labour memes, but it is the case.
Time.
EE Lib Dem .org.uk.
Absolute time.
Voting.
Time.
There.
I did it to Helen. I'll do it to you. I'll repeat. It is contested who's in second place, at least. I will also add, people tend not to vote the same in general elections as they do in local elections. I had a pop at Helen, I had to have a pop at you. Where are we? Gary.
Labour and Conservatives, that's the only government I've ever known, and Lib Dems for a while during the coalition. And I haven't seen my life improved. So Reform are here because the elected representatives we sent to Parliament have failed to do what we elected them to do. So I can't blame people for not knowing or being undecided whether they want to vote. Those people who acquiesce, those people who feel disenfranchised. I feel disenfranchised. I'm not even a politician. I'm just a concerned father, husband, and citizen who feels compelled to use the prism of politics to just change the system and reform our institutions. That's the only reason I'm standing. I'm not desperate for this, but I am desperate for change. But one message I do want to make clear is this opportunity only comes around, only presents itself every 5 years. So do not acquiesce, do not waste your vote. You don't have to consent, you don't have to comply, but you must vote reform on the 4th of July.
Oh. If nothing else, he deserves a round of applause for that. Excellent. Beat that, Dan.
So whether you're excited by it or not, we are going to have a Labour government on the 4th of July. The question for you is, who do you want to represent you to that government? Do you want an MP who says everything they do is good? Do you want an MP that says everything they do is bad? Or do you want an MP who only views that government through the prism of what is best for our constituency? You can change the rosette, or do you want to change the politics? Candidates offer you the moon and stars if they win, but I say judge us by our defeat. Who here have you seen before? And in defeat, how many of us here will you see again? If I don't get a single vote on the 4th of July, on the 5th of July, I go back to serving my community. So do you want a party spokesman, or do you want a strong independent councillor, candidate, who will fight on local issues? I think it's time for one of us to represent all of us. So on Independence Day, I urge you to vote independent.
Wasn't as good as this. Right, that's it, everyone. I think we're just going to get under the wire of 9 o'clock, so I'm quite pleased about that. But thank you very much to all our candidates. You all did a sterling job. Thank you to you lot for all your questions and for participating in the ways that you did. I'd like to thank Nikki and all the volunteers again. It's a bloody hard thing to organise, and well done you. And thank you to our candidates. Thanks very much, everyone.